The parents of a missing baby will now be facing murder charges. It comes as the search continues for baby Emmanuel Haro.
Deputies arrested the parents after they say inconsistencies emerged over the baby's disappearance. Inland Empire Bureau Chief Rob McMillan is live outside the courthouse in Riverside, where the parents appeared in court. Rob?
Well, this hearing was very short. It only lasted a couple of minutes. The arraignment postponed until next week because we're told neither parent has an attorney at this point.
Close your eyes and imagine your child, just 7 months old, vanishes in a flash. No note, no warning, no reason. Now imagine the last people who saw them, your own parents. That's the reality of the Emmanuel Haro case. And today, we're peeling back the layers of deception and heartbreak. In a shocking update revealed on August 27, 2025, Riverside County District Attorney Michael Hestron confirmed that infant Emmanuel Haro likely died from ongoing severe abuse weeks before his parents falsely claimed he was kidnapped on August 14. Investigators now firmly believe Emmanuel's last confirmed sighting was on August 5th. Authorities say they have a strong indication of where his remains are buried, even though Emmanuel's body is still missing. Meanwhile, the community's outrage has only deepened. On August 14, 2025, Rebecca Haro claimed she was assaulted while changing Emmanuel's diaper in a parking lot, then woke up to find her baby gone. Surveillance footage and interrogation quickly dismantled her narrative. Investigators spotted inconsistencies, prompting further scrutiny. By August 22nd, both parents, Rebecca, 41, and Jake Haro, 32, were arrested and charged with murder and filing a false police report, each held on $1 million bail. Their arraignment is set for September 4. This tragedy did not occur in a vacuum. In 2018, Jake Haro severely abused his infant daughter from a previous relationship, inflicting brain hemorrhages, multiple fractures, and other life-altering injuries. That child is now permanently disabled, suffering from cerebral palsy. Despite the severity, the judge handed down a suspended sentence with probation, which DA Hestron bluntly called an outrageous error in judgment. He stated, if that judge had done his job, Emmanuel would be alive today. Listen, if this case doesn't gut you, you're not paying attention. A defenseless baby was failed not once, but twice. First by people meant to protect him, and then by a justice system slow to respond. Hit subscribe right now, because if you don't, you're choosing to look away. And if you do look away, at least be brave enough to admit it in the comments, where someone else's child might still be lost in silence.
This case isn't just tragedy, it's a wake-up call. The system failed Emmanuel once before, and now his death threatens to expose those failures in a devastating way. In Chapter 2, we'll examine the timeline of events, clipped together with mounting contradictions, and how every deception built toward this painful reveal. Stay with me, because once you see how the trust shattered, there's no going back to the world as you knew it. August 14, 2025, started like any other summer morning in San Jose, California, but by the end of that day, the entire community would be gripped by fear and heartbreak. 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro was reported missing under deeply troubling circumstances. His parents told authorities that Emmanuel had disappeared suddenly, setting off a frantic manhunt that would soon draw national attention. Police immediately launched an Amber Alert, plastering Emmanuel's face across highway billboards, TV screens, and social media feeds. Within hours, dozens of officers, search and rescue teams, and even volunteers from the community were out combing through neighborhoods, parks, and nearby wooded areas. Drones buzzed overhead. Bloodhounds traced Emmanuel's scent from the family's apartment, but the trail quickly went cold. Detectives worked around the clock, interviewing neighbors, checking surveillance cameras, and retracing the parents' steps in the hours leading up to Emmanuel's disappearance. But something wasn't adding up.
According to investigators, the timeline given by Emmanuel's parents appeared inconsistent. Their accounts of when and how the baby went missing began to shift under questioning. Detectives noticed details that didn't align. Statements about who last saw Emmanuel, what time he was fed, and where he was when he allegedly vanished. Still, the search pressed forward with urgency. The community refused to give up hope. Vigils were held, and families showed up with candles, posters, and prayers for Emmanuel's safe return. Local news anchors described the case as one of the most disturbing missing child incidents in recent memory. But even as the search widened, suspicion was quietly tightening closer to home. Behind closed doors, investigators were already beginning to question whether Emmanuel's disappearance was really the work of an outsider, or whether the answers were much closer than anyone wanted to believe. As the days turned into weeks with no sign of baby Emmanuel Haro, the tone of the investigation shifted dramatically. In the beginning, the community rallied around the grieving parents. Candlelight vigils were held. Flyers with Emmanuel's photo, his big brown eyes and chubby cheeks, were stapled to every telephone pole in town. Search parties combed through fields, wooded areas, and even drainage ditches, desperately hoping the infant had somehow been abandoned but was still alive. But behind the scenes, detectives were beginning to notice troubling inconsistencies. The parents, who had first appeared as frantic and devastated, now seemed strangely detached in certain interviews. Their timelines did not always align. When asked about the exact moment they last saw Emmanuel, their answers shifted from one telling to the next. One detective noted in his report that the mother appeared calm to the point of being unnatural, while the father displayed frustration and defensiveness whenever pressed for details. Neighbors also came forward, quietly whispering about loud arguments in the Haro household in the weeks before the baby's disappearance. The turning point came when investigators reviewed surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses. Cameras placed along the roads leading out of the neighborhood failed to show any sign of a stranger taking Emmanuel. No cars came or went that matched the description given in the initial missing child alert. If an abduction had occurred, it had left behind no trace, something seasoned investigators knew was highly unusual. Adding to the unease, cadaver dogs brought to the Haro residence alerted in multiple spots inside the home. While no physical evidence was yet found, the alerts could not be ignored. Quietly, suspicion was growing. What had once been treated as a desperate search for a missing child was beginning to morph into something far darker, a potential case of parental involvement. For many in the community, this was a heartbreaking shift. Friends who had once delivered meals and offered support to the Haro family began to pull back. The possibility that Emmanuel's disappearance was not the work of a stranger, but something orchestrated within his own home, cast a chilling shadow over Rehoboth. By the end of August, detectives had restructured the entire investigation. Instead of focusing outward, they were now looking inward, into the lives, the arguments, and the secrets of Emmanuel's parents.
For weeks, the disappearance of 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro had been shrouded in uncertainty, with whispers of foul play growing louder each passing day. Investigators had combed through every inch of the family's neighborhood, interviewed relatives, and even retraced the parents' every step. Yet no concrete proof had tied them to their child's vanishing. That all changed in one chilling breakthrough. The turning point began with the careful re-examination of surveillance footage. Detectives had initially reviewed hours of video from neighbors' security cameras and local businesses, but it was during a second, painstaking pass that something disturbing surfaced. A camera mounted on a corner house just blocks from the Haro residence captured the parents' vehicle making an unexplained trip late at night, just hours after Emmanuel was last seen. What troubled investigators wasn't just the unusual timing, but the way the parents avoided mentioning this trip in their statements. Equally damning was what forensic teams discovered in the family home. During a more advanced search using luminol testing, faint traces of blood were detected in an area of the nursery. Though invisible to the naked eye, under forensic light it glowed, a silent witness contradicting the parents' repeated claims that Emmanuel had simply disappeared in the night. The tension mounted when phone records were subpoenaed. Text messages exchanged between the parents in the early hours following Emmanuel's disappearance revealed conversations investigators later described as prodded and evasive. They appeared to discuss cleaning up and staying consistent, phrases prosecutors would later argue pointed to a cover-up. With this mounting evidence, investigators could no longer view the Haros as grieving parents. They were now the primary suspects. The evidence didn't just whisper suspicion, it shouted deception. The final push came when cadaver dogs, brought in weeks after the disappearance, alerted near the trunk of the family's car. Though no remains were found, the alert was enough to strengthen the case. Combined with the surveillance, the forensics, and the inconsistencies in their testimony, law enforcement finally had the leverage to move forward. On a tense Friday morning, law enforcement descended on the Haro residence. Neighbors watched in shock as officers led Emmanuel's parents away in handcuffs. For the first time since the baby's disappearance, there was a sense that justice, or at least accountability, was within reach. The charges were severe: neglect, obstruction of justice, and most devastatingly, homicide. Emmanuel's body had not yet been recovered, but prosecutors argued that the evidence was overwhelming enough to prove foul play. The case had shifted dramatically. What began as a desperate search for a missing child had transformed into a criminal trial that would grip the nation. The day the trial finally opened, the nation seemed to hold its breath. Cameras lined the courthouse steps, journalists jostled for position, and online forums buzzed with speculation. For months, the disappearance of baby Emmanuel had gripped the public, but now the story shifted into a new phase, the courtroom battle, where truth and lies would collide under the harsh light of justice. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, almost suffocating. The parents entered hand in hand, their faces pale yet defiant. Some saw their clasped hands as a sign of solidarity, others as a performance staged for sympathy. At that moment, one thing was clear: this trial would not just be about facts and evidence, but about perception and emotion. The prosecution opened with a statement that immediately shook the courtroom. They insisted the case was not about a mysterious disappearance, but about betrayal within the very home where Emmanuel was supposed to be safest. Every word seemed like a dagger aimed at the parents, painting them as the architects of their child's fate. The claim sent a wave of murmurs across the audience, and the tension was almost unbearable. Then came the defense's response, and it was equally explosive. They described the investigation as a rush to judgment, built on weak circumstantial evidence and public pressure. They argued that the parents were victims of a flawed system, desperate to find someone to blame. This counterpunch electrified the room. Suddenly, the courtroom was no longer just about Emmanuel, it was about whether justice was truly blind, or if the parents had been convicted in the court of public opinion long before the trial began. Observers leaned in as details were teased: the timeline of the baby's disappearance, the inconsistencies in the parents' statements, the forensic reports that had led to charges. Every revelation only deepened the divide among those watching. Some whispered that the prosecution's case was airtight, while others muttered that the evidence was thin and fueled by bias. The tension reached a fever pitch when the prosecutor described the final days before Emmanuel vanished, hinting at patterns of behavior within the home that would soon be laid bare. The parents shook their heads vigorously, as if the very air around them was filled with lies. One juror shifted uncomfortably, and even the judge had to call for order more than once as gasps rippled through the courtroom. By the time the first day of testimony ended, one thing was certain: the trial had already divided the nation. Some walked away convinced that the parents were guilty beyond redemption. Others saw them as pawns, unfairly targeted by an investigation that had lost its way. And then there were those who, torn between both sides, left with a single haunting question: if not the parents, then who? The opening of the trial was more than just legal proceedings. It was a spectacle of human emotion, public judgment, and a desperate search for truth. And as the cameras flashed outside and the world debated online, the fate of baby Emmanuel and the parents accused of betraying him hung in the balance.
The case of baby Emmanuel has gripped the nation for weeks. And as of September 1st, 2025, the trial is moving into even more dramatic territory. The parents, still standing trial, have entered not guilty pleas, a move that many find shocking given the mounting evidence. Prosecutors continue to build their narrative around inconsistencies in their statements, their behavior during the search, and most importantly, the forensic evidence linking them to Emmanuel's disappearance. The courtroom has become a battleground of emotions. On one side, prosecutors paint the parents as deceptive, manipulative, and fully aware of what happened to their 7-month-old son. On the other, the defense insists that the couple is being unfairly targeted, claiming investigators jumped too quickly to conclusions without considering other possibilities. But perhaps what keeps this case so raw are the words of the parents themselves. Emmanuel's father, despite his history of prior child abuse, has stood firm, declaring that he is innocent, that he and his wife loved their son, and that they are being vilified because of mistakes from his past. He has told reporters and the court alike that he is being judged unfairly, not on facts, but on reputation. Emmanuel's mother, her black eye drawing sympathy from some and suspicion from others, continues to insist that she is a grieving mother clinging to hope. Through tears, she maintains that Emmanuel was taken and that her husband could never have harmed him. To some, their statements sound like the cries of desperate parents wrongfully accused. To others, they reek of denial, evasion, and guilt. Public opinion is split. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered daily, some chanting for justice for baby Emmanuel, others demanding that the parents be given the benefit of the doubt until conclusive proof emerges. Social media has only fueled the divide, with hashtags like #JusticeForEmmanuel and #FreeTheParents trending simultaneously. The latest development shaking the courtroom came when a forensic expert revealed traces of baby Emmanuel's DNA found on an object investigators believe had been concealed inside the family home. This revelation was met with audible gasps, sparking debates over whether this is the smoking gun prosecutors need or simply another piece of evidence open to interpretation. As of now, the trial shows no sign of slowing down. New witnesses are scheduled to testify in the coming days, and the tension is only escalating. With emotions running high and the case teetering between sympathy and outrage, one thing is certain. The story of baby Emmanuel has not only put his parents under the harshest spotlight, but has also forced the nation to confront disturbing questions about justice, trust, and truth. And as the trial moves forward, the only question everyone is asking remains: will the court finally uncover what really happened to baby Emmanuel? And now, the world watches as this trial unfolds. But I want to hear from you. Do you believe Emmanuel's parents are victims of a tragic circumstance, or are they hiding a terrible truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this case isn't just about one family. It's about the fragile line between trust, justice, and truth. Let's talk about it.